Hi again, welcome. It's Michigan's AutoTalk podcast, episode number 50. That's right, we are at 50 episodes of Michigan's AutoTalk podcast. We remind you, every one of these episodes is all about the automobile, celebrating the automobile, everything automotive. Yes, we talk about trucks too. We're also here about helping and supporting you, the car and truck owners across our great state of Michigan, birthplace of everything automotive. We try to avoid having you do stupid, because when stupid happens, Al Schwinkendorf and John Puhek, our host of this podcast, I'm producer Phil Tower, they will tell you stupid guys cost people money, right?
That's right.
Something like that.
But the problem is they usually do it under the guise of trying to save money. And, here's the thing right now. I'm just looking on Gas Buddy, and I guess I can't believe the price dropped since I bought gas this afternoon. But, this is Grand Haven, Gowan, and Zeeland, Spring Lake, Greenville, Holland. They're saying 87 octanes like 387. And just because it doesn't matter where we go, let's look at the E-85 in the same places, 292. And I've been seeing a lot of people at the ethanol pumps. And yes, you have a flex fuel vehicle. And I remember we had a customer who didn't care about cars. He was uppity up at Amway. He had money. He had everything he wanted, but cars to him were just a stupid waste of money. He was like a financial guy at Amway. And so he went down to his Ford dealer because he needed a new car, because we told him this one is not worth working on anymore. And he's going like, I want something mid-size. What's the cheapest thing you got out here? And they took him over, and he called me up, and he said they got this silver Taurus. It's got everything on it that I need. It's a nice car. It's got this little green leaf on the trunk, and they're going to lease it to me for 0%, for like 3 years, and then a buyout that's super cheap because they can't move it. What's the little green leaf? And I said, well, it's a flex fuel vehicle, and you have the ability to burn E-85 fuel in that if you so want to. And so he's like, well, 0%. He goes, why should I go take money out of my savings that's making interest to go buy something I can buy for 0%? So he went and he did it, and I told him never put E-85 in it, and he drove it 100,000 miles, threw it away, and got another car. Nowadays, people don't even realize they have flex fuel vehicles anymore. When they got rid of the gas caps and got rid of the yellow cap, people don't even know, which is a good thing. But the deal is, if you just look at the science of it, and everybody hates doing math, and we used to go over this on the radio show all the time, you got to have, and they're changing the numbers now because we have winter blend fuels and summer blend fuels. And, so there's a great range on how many BTUs a gallon of regular unleaded gas puts out versus the 85. But on the very, 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 very conservative side, if there's not a 25% difference between the price of the two fuels, the decrease in economy you're going to get when you run the E85 is not going to make up for it. So roughly, if gasoline is $4 a gallon, the E85's got to be $1.90 or $2.99 or less to make it worth your while, and it's not that big a spread. It's about 60 cents.
Yeah, that's a great point, and I think you're absolutely right about the first thing you said about most people have no clue, and it's a good thing because they're better off running regular gasoline in there. And I hope people just heard what Al Schwinkendorf said, which is when you put E85 in a vehicle that can run it, you're actually getting lower performance, which is lowering your mileage, which in the end is going to cost you the same or even more in the long run. And I think people just look at the number, just like Dan Ronda told us in episode 49. Sometimes people just say throw the cheapest tires on, and they end up getting mad about it because they don't last. And I mean, it's pretty simple math, like you said.
Well, and, this was a compromise when They really cranked down on the corporate average fuel economy of vehicles like in the late 90s, early 2000s, when they really, really cranked down on it. And they were asking the manufacturers to meet numbers that there's absolutely no way they could. They got in there, and the lobbyists, and I met an engineer from Ford at the Society of Automotive Engineers big show in Detroit one year. And Pat O'Neill rented a bus, and a bunch of us went down there. And I'm talking to a guy. He said, our lobbyists went out there, and they said, if we do this and make it an alternative fuel vehicle, because, you know, the government at the time wanted electric cars and hydrogen fuel cell cars 30 years ago, and it just wasn't going to happen. And so they snuck in with this, okay, we'll do this thing. You get your corn growers to make some gasoline, and we'll make these flex fuel vehicles that can burn either or, because there's not enough infrastructure for them to run strictly off the E85. And so the auto manufacturers, the big three, got it pushed through the government that would be okay, and they never expected anybody to do it. I mean, I remember at the time we had a customer who was in charge of the gas stations for Meyer. Meyer put in E85, and there's a place called Green Island up in Greenville.
Yep.
And I think they had another store in Ionia, and those were the only places around here. And one time we had a guest on the radio show that was from Lansing, and she's on kind of like 69, 96 at the interchange there. Maybe it's 96 and 127. Anyway, she was approached by Lansing because Granholm,
yeah.
She went in and bought a whole fleet of American-made flex fuel vehicles to fill up the state motor pool, and she had a mandate that if it was a flex fuel vehicle, that you run E85 in it and show the people out there what it's all about, wasting our taxpayer money, basically. So I talked to the people from Green Island up in Greenville, and I talked to our guy from Myers and what their prices were on E85, and I called this station down there on the highway in Lansing, and they were like $2 more than 87 octane gasoline. I go, what's the deal? And they said they came down here and they wanted to fill their vehicles with this E85. We didn't want to put it in. There's been new mandates about the tanks in the ground. They have to go inside a container with leak monitoring systems. And she goes, it cost us way too much money. And she said, I'm pretty confident she's not going to get voted back in 2 years, and that's all going to go away. So we said, fine, we'll put the E85 in, but we're going to charge what we got to charge to pay for our overhead, and that's just how it is. So our tax dollars went to buy, $4 E85 back in the days of $1.75 gasoline. That's just the way it was.
The lesson was learned. I think in the end, everybody knows this is going to happen. We have things that happen in the world, and somebody told me this, and I said, no, you're absolutely right. Gas prices go up and down based on events, whether it's a refinery explosion, right, or some idiot in Russia invading.
She wakes up with a bellyache.
Yep.
Yeah.
Invading a country like Ukraine, and we'll blame it all on Russia. It's way more than that, and people are already realize that. By the way, fun fact: when we were down in Florida, we took a little side trip to the Everglades National Forest, which was pretty cool. Gas. In the Everglades, there's not many stations around. $4, and I think we saw $4.89 a gallon down there. So,
though, if you've been to the grocery store or a restaurant, gasoline was due to come up anyway.
Yes.
It really was.
It's called
that's
inflation.
The standard we set. But what cracks me up is, and people come in with a Honda Civic's got a 12-gallon gas tank in it. So 30 cents over 12 gallons is less than $4. I mean, your lunch at McDonald's went up $3, and you eat that every day. So, I mean, I've always thought that it's so funny that we base everything on, the price of gas is just terrible. People go out to dinner and pay $80 for dinner that they paid, $65 for 2 months ago and never think twice about it. Oh, yeah, stuff's going up. That's just the way it is. But when they put it in their gas tank, then they freak out. The other thing we do have to talk about, though, when we're talking about E85, and we'll let John cover this, is that especially if you've got that, I think Suburbans and Tahoes in about 2002 became flex fuel vehicles. And when you run into the customer who's got that 2002, that's got 180,000 miles on it, it's never had a E85 in it in his life, and then you go dump it in the tank, what happens?
Yeah, exactly. It destroys it. Simple as that. It runs so hotter. Your knock sensors are going crazy. There's actual little sensors in the rail that determine the alcohol content and calculate
based on temperature.
Exactly, based on temperature, based on a lot of different factors, and the PCM then adjusts how much fuel is put in, and anyone will tell you once you do a conventional 87 octane switch to an E85, it takes about, I think, 2 or 3 tanks is what I was told, to finally switch everything over, allow the computer to compensate the massive alcohol content. You're still running the same plugs, same setup, and I can't tell you how many times we've seen it. I guess it was more, would you say, like early 2000s, where
like the Chrysler vans and stuff.
They would grenade themselves. They would get so hot. They would run so lean because people would say, "Oh, I can go E85." And then the next time I'm going to go 87 tank.
Gas tank
exactly.
every day.
Yeah, and then just, you go back and forth, and it is such a, I don't know, like I always kind of thought of it as like a corporate game of just like trying to meet the CAF ratings, and I think that that's the way like Ford is splitting out their EV and their gas, and it's like, well, no, the EV showed that we're not putting anything out, so our carbon footprint is nothing versus our Raptor 6.2 whatever, monster guzzling gas, that's different than what we've got over here, and so that way we can offset our carbon footprint. And you start playing all these little games of how to figure, how can I hide my pollution footprint, basically. But the E85 was an attempt. I think I guess I would say it was like one of the first attempts. And you have cylinder reactivation, you've got variable valve timing. All this stuff is all just to get better gas mileage. But when you run E85, at least from what we've seen, and the fact that the most manufacturers don't really push that anymore. Yeah, I mean,
they still are flex fuel, but they don't even tell you. It's fine print on the sticker on the window.
Exactly, because for the most part, they looked at it and they're like, "Yeah, you're not going to get that much more. We can maybe squeeze more gas mileage if we, do variable valve timing or do X, Y, and Z." And so,
and there's a lot of misconceptions out there.
Yeah, I guess if you have one of those vehicles, just stick with it. I mean, I don't go back and forth.
Good advice.
Well, yeah, back and forth is one thing, especially for the people who have never used it ever. And that's where we see a lot of problems. You got a 10-year-old car where the computer never worked in those parameters and none of that stuff ever came into play. And then for some reason, they decide to put a tank full in it.
It was always the mid-2000 Ford Tauruses that I can remember that they put them in there and fill it up with E85, and then the customer would be like, "It doesn't run right." We're like, "Okay, well, what's wrong with it?" "It just doesn't run right." I'm like, "Okay, we scan, no codes. Drives fine. It just doesn't run right." It's such a different setup. It's kind of going almost from like a traditional transmission to a CVT. It just it doesn't. It takes almost more time for the driver to understand, like, no, this is how it's going to run.
Yeah, you get an older car, the effects of the alcohol in there. I mean, the fuel systems and that are built to deal with it. And there's places where it works. NASCAR's been running on E85 for a while, and they build their cars to run on it, and that's a different situation. And even though your injectors and your fuel lines and everything are made to deal with the alcohol, you've got 100,000 miles worth of crap build up in it, and then you put that alcohol in there, it cleans it all out. It plugs up injectors. It strips out the, it just creates all kinds of problems. And I'm telling you, you're never going to make up for it money wise.
No.
Look, just go buy the 25%. If gas is $4 and it's not under $3, don't even try it. And if it does, think twice, because of the $1,000 you're going to have to give us to get the car running right once you're done.
Well, I can remember the last little thing on this, and I'll let you take it, Phil. I can remember there was a couple guys that I think they had a fleet. I forget who it was, but it was a flex fuel vehicle, and they started running the E-85. It was a General Motors product, and I can remember looking at the scan data because it came in because it wasn't technically running right. The alcohol content sensor was pegged. Like, it just was screaming. And so the injectors were being controlled way open, and like there's just like there's so much alcohol in the system, we gotta burn it, and they're opening it up, and the fuel trims were crazy. And yeah, this is getting a little more technical, but it basically you burn more. Exactly, you burn more. But I just remember looking, and it's like, holy cow, that's like balls to the wall. You're just getting at it. And as soon as they switched off and went back to, normal 87, everything was fine, had no issues.
And there's people like, and I know it's a big issue in Colorado, Minnesota, and the UP and that, where people will go in and simply just look at the board and say, okay, gas is $4.24 and this is $3.99, and it says I can do it. I'm going to put the $3.99 in there. A lot of those tanks haven't been refilled in months and months and years. There was a guy on IATN that put a thing in there, and he said he talked to the station owner, and they got their initial fill. It was like in 2018, and they have not topped the thing off. He goes, you got people here buying gas that's been sitting in the ground for years. In this kind of climate, God only knows what you're going to get out of that.
Yep. No, we've got a place up in the UP in the Keweenaw, and there's a certain gas station in Verburg that everybody knows. Yeah, it's really cheap, but you don't go there because it's a reason it's that cheap, and you just keep passing by, and it only takes about one or two snowmobilers or four-wheelers to figure out why. But no, it's running along that same setup, and you get for what you pay for, but
Episode 50, stay away from the 85.
There's a headline. There's a summary right there.
Just go to the red tank, get the racing gas, and there you go. Takes it all out, and you're good to go.
By the way, if you're driving a Ford F-150 or an Expedition or one of those big Navigators, and you're wondering why it's taking you a lot longer to stop, that's because your master cylinder is leaking. Ford has a major recall. This actually goes back 2 years ago to June of 2020, and they've added 200,000 other older pickups. So this is, I don't know what year your truck's too new, Al. This is 2014 to 2017, so that's almost 300,000 F-150s. That's a lot of vehicles, as well as 2016 to 2017 Expeditions and Lincoln Navigators, as well as 2016 through 18 F-150s, all equipped with the 3.5-liter EcoBoost engine. So that is probably why your truck isn't stopping as well. And there's a recall out for that, just FYI.
Should have bought a Chevy.
The way the recalls are. Hang on a minute. Follow the link on this.
Yeah, we have equal time. Go ahead. Go ahead, Al.
There was a link on there from, what's her name, Paige?
Yep.
Yeah, Paige says, who we've had on the show before.
Oh, Phoebe. Phoebe, that's right. Phoebe, yep.
Phoebe, there you go. Yeah, Phoebe says. Yep. And then there's also some about the GM. And you know what the problem is that GM and Ford, it used to be your Ford had a Philco radio, and your Chevy had a AC Delco radio. Well, all that has gone away. They just buy stuff from whoever can make it. They don't make anything. They assemble vehicles, They don't even... I think Lob Del Emery, which used to be Fisher Body for GM or for Ford, is gone now. as far as this. I know they stamp them themselves, but just like Fisher Body has gone for GM, everything gets subletted out, and there's just issues. We had a customer with a diesel Volkswagen that needed a turbocharger, and his was at the point where it was undrivable, and we were like number, what was it, 1,347 in the world waiting for a turbocharger.
Yep.
And they go by the month of the year, and we waited like over 8 months, and then they kept saying, well, it's going to come out on week 38. Oh, it's going to be week 42. Oh, it's going to be, they finally got some. In the first 800 of the turbos that they got had a casting flaw, because everybody that made the original ones that obviously had a problem would have to retool and rebuild, and they were busy with other contracts and they couldn't make one for them, so they went to somebody else. They knocked them out. They made 800 to help this, 1,500 people that needed turbochargers, and they were all defective. They never even got installed. Our guy got lucky and had a friend who worked at Weller Auto Parts at the junkyard, and called him up and said, hey, we just got a car in with your engine in it. It looks like somebody just had the turbo replaced, and he got a used one that was good, and we bolted on there and got him going. Otherwise, that car would still be sitting in our lot, which would be over a year right now. Mm-hmm. It's a problem with all the manufacturers with everything.
I guess the one thing I'd be kind of curious to see, I know the engineers did their homework, but with all the adaptive cruise, the adaptive braking, you're telling me it's coming down to a leaking booster?
Master cylinder.
Master cylinder coming down.
We've had hydraulic brakes. I think Chrysler started in 1934.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like the Takata airbag setup. Like, I bet you exactly. There's something else going on, but they just got to cover their tail, and if they put a big blanket over it, then you'll cover yourself. But
and what gets me is, like, every job we do at the shop, you have to look at risk and reward. When you jump into like a huge repair on a car, and you got to say, what can possibly go wrong with this? If I go in there and I pull the cylinder head and I fix this engine, and something else happens and this engine blows up, it's a $4,500 job that I'm not, I got $3,800 into it or whatever, and then I got to go buy a $6,000 engine plus the labor to put it in, and you got to go back and forth with that and be real with your customer and go, look, this is an option, but I'm not comfortable with it because I don't like the exposure to me. Yep. And when you're like Takata, I mean, that company's been subsidized by the auto manufacturers just to get the governments off their butt so they can get airbags. There's still cars out there that need airbags. And the minute they get the last one fixed and done, that company's gone.
Yeah.
It's just, they just dug themselves a hole they can't get out of. They can't afford to.
Well said.
And I almost kind of want to put like a little sign. It's not exactly the same, but I think a sign, if we had like a bolt that was broken in half and said, like, your 15-minute job is one crack away from like a 4-hour job to drill that bolt out. I almost kind of want to put that like behind Rachel in our main entryway, just so when people come, like, oh, well, this should only be this, or it should be just a simple little job left and right. And the only ones that truly understand it are the ones that they started doing it and then they broke the bolts off themselves.
And then they bring it to us, and then they know.
And then exactly. Phil, I know, I'm sure your boy doesn't know anything about that, as he, would potentially bring a vehicle to us half assembled.
Yeah, I wouldn't know anything about it. I tried to do it
in my driveway, and it didn't work out well.
Yep.
So here you go.
And with that,
you're always going to have that. That's just business. Doesn't matter if you're selling widgets or you're fixing cars.
All right, he gets equal time on episode 155. We'll do that. We'll do that.
No, his was done under the guise of education. So we'll give him that.
Yep.
Yeah, he gets a pass.
And he's paid for his mistakes, And he really didn't, because he didn't pay for anything in the first place. He did it himself. So he's coming along. He'll be all right.
Oh, yeah. We're good.
Is this therapy or is this a podcast? That's what I want to know. That's just curious.
A little bitch session, basically.
It all depends. Are you laying down on a couch or not?
Yeah. Well said. All right, that's going to put the wraps on episode 50 with one of the strangest endings we probably ever had. You can find us on Facebook, Michigan's AutoTalk podcast. You can also find us on Instagram, and make sure you tell a friend, share the podcast. We will be back at you real soon. Until then, I'm producer Phil Tower.
I'm Al Schwinkendorf.
I'm John Puhek. Thanks for listening. Have a good one.